The envelope felt heavier than I expected. My fingers shook as I held it, the official seal pressed tight. I didn't rip it open right away. I couldn't. For a moment, I let myself just breathe and listen to the quiet of the apartment. The hum of the old air conditioner, the faint chatter from the street below, the ticking of the wall clock, it all felt louder than normal. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a stack of documents, neatly arranged. The first page made my stomach drop. A forged will. My husband's signature, supposedly notarized, claiming half of my inheritance from my late grandfather was his now. He had already tried to steal what wasn't his. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just sat down, slowly reading through the papers, one by one. My hands didn't tremble anymore. They were steady, cold, determined. I knew the fight had begun. My name is Sophia Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Brazil, a small but thriving town in Indiana. My grandfather, Henry Carter, passed away 6 months ago, leaving behind a sizable estate and his life's work, a collection of rare antiques, investments, and a trust that ensured his legacy would be protected. My husband, no, ex-husband now, Derek Lawson, had always been charming. Too charming. Too smooth. But I never imagined he would go this far. We met about 4 years ago at a local art auction. He complimented my grandfather's antique clock collection, feigned admiration for my modest art gallery, and slowly wormed his way into my life. By the time we were married, I thought I had found someone who understood me. Little did I know, he had other plans. The forged will wasn't the first warning. A few weeks ago, I found suspicious charges on our joint account, large sums of money transferred to unknown vendors, supposedly for art acquisitions or investment purposes. And then, a week before my grandfather's funeral, I caught him trying to add his name to a trust account online. That day, I realized Derek wasn't just unfaithful emotionally, he was planning to steal from me legally too. I stared at the documents again, carefully noting the signatures, the dates, the notary stamps. Everything was wrong, but convincing enough to fool someone who didn't know the truth. It made me sick, but I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. I immediately called my lawyer, Vanessa Moore, a sharp woman with icy precision. She didn't waste words when I explained the situation. Sophia, this is deliberate. He's been planning this for months. We need evidence, fast. Photocopy everything. Save emails, bank transfers, text messages, everything. And whatever you do, don't confront him alone. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Vanessa's voice had a calm authority that always made me feel like I could handle the impossible. That evening, I sat in my small living room, the Indiana twilight casting long shadows across the wooden floors. My mind raced. Derek had been confident he could take my grandfather's fortune without anyone noticing. He never expected me to find the papers before the court hearing. He never expected Isla Woods to come forward. Isla. She was a young woman, barely 24, a gallery assistant at a local contemporary art space. She had been involved with Derek for months, thinking he genuinely cared about her career. I found out about her after a tip from a mutual acquaintance who noticed the way Derek had been splitting his attention. At first, I wasn't sure I could trust her. But then I received a message that changed everything. Sophia, I can't stay quiet anymore. Derek isn't who he says he is. He's planning to take everything that isn't his. I'll testify if needed. I just want you to know the truth. Her words were short, hesitant, but the implication was crystal clear. Derek had been manipulating everyone, including her, for months. He was using people like pawns. And now his sights were set on my inheritance. The next morning, I met Isla at a small cafe in downtown Brazil. She looked younger than her age, nervous, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I know this is awkward, but I couldn't stay silent." I nodded. "Go on." She took a deep breath. "I met Derek at an art event. He was charming, convincing, and he said he wanted to help me get noticed in the art world. But he only wanted access to people, collectors, money. And recently, he's been obsessed with your grandfather's estate. He talks about it constantly. I saw the drafts, the transfers. He's planning to take half your inheritance, just like in that letter. I listened in silence, the pieces falling into place. Not only was Derek betraying me emotionally, but he was actively plotting a financial betrayal. I felt anger rising, but I controlled it. I had to think strategically. Isla continued, her voice trembling slightly. I'm done being used. And I thought, you deserve to know. I can provide emails, messages, anything. I'll testify if necessary. Her courage stunned me. I thanked her quietly, feeling the weight of her confession. With her help, I had leverage, evidence Derek could not deny. When I returned home, I immediately called Vanessa. We have a witness, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Isla Woods. She can testify about Derek's intentions and actions. Vanessa paused. Perfect. That strengthens our case tremendously. But Sophia, be careful. He won't go quietly. He'll try intimidation, manipulation. Stay alert. I agreed. The plan was forming in my mind. Derek thought he could outsmart me, but he had underestimated my resolve. He had played with the wrong person. Later that day, I walked into my grandfather's old study, now empty except for a few scattered books and framed photos. I sat at his massive oak desk, running my fingers over the polished surface, imagining his hands here, writing letters, planning, protecting. He had anticipated trouble. He had set up the trust specifically to safeguard my inheritance from people like Derek. I felt a strange warmth in my chest, a sense of protection, even after his death. I knew the coming weeks would be tense. There would be meetings, legal challenges, and probably confrontations. But for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt prepared. I would protect what was mine, no matter what it took. As night fell over Brazil, Indiana, I stood on the balcony, looking out at the quiet streets. The town seemed peaceful, unaware of the storm about to hit. But I knew Derek's web of lies was about to unravel. And I would be there, waiting, ready to see justice done. If you've ever faced betrayal by someone you trusted, you know how devastating it feels. Comment below, what would you do if someone tried to steal everything you had worked for? The next morning, I arrived at Vanessa Moore's law office early, my palms still clammy from anticipation. The building was unassuming, red brick with a small brass plaque near the door, but inside, it felt like a fortress of strategy. Vanessa was already at her desk, sifting through a mountain of files, her sharp eyes scanning each page with the precision of a hawk. Sophia, she said without looking up, you've got some serious leverage. Isla's testimony, the emails, the evidence of the attempted account manipulation, it's more than enough to make Derek pause. But we need to move carefully. He'll be underestimating us, like he always does. I nodded, gripping the edge of the conference table. I want him to understand he won't get away with this. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Good. But you also have to understand something about people like Derek. They're not rational. You can't predict their reactions. You control what you can, documents, witnesses, the law. That's it. He'll try to get under your skin. Don't let him. I swallowed hard, thinking about the weeks ahead. Derek had a reputation for charm, for making people feel he was indispensable. But I'd seen the cracks, the lies, the hidden manipulations, the emotional games. And now, with the forged will, he had gone too far. Vanessa laid out the plan. First, we confront him formally with a pre-trial meeting. I'll be there. Bring all evidence, emails, messages, copies of the suspicious transfers. Isla will attend as well. She doesn't have to say much yet. Just being present is enough to show we're serious. The goal isn't a fight. The goal is to make him realize there's no way he can manipulate this. I listened carefully. And if he tries to intimidate me, you stay calm. I handle him, Vanessa said firmly. You show confidence. Remember, Derek thrives on chaos. Give him none. That afternoon, I walked into the neutral conference room at a modest hotel in downtown Brazil. Vanessa and Isla were already seated. Vanessa gave me a reassuring nod, and Isla offered a tentative smile. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of anticipation pressing down on us. Derek arrived a few minutes later, flanked by his lawyer, Michael Trent. Derek looked impeccable, dark-tailored suit, hair perfectly combed, the same charming grin he always wore. But there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or suspicion. "Good afternoon," Derek said smoothly, taking a seat across from me. "I hear we have some matters to settle." Vanessa didn't waste a second. She opened her folder, sliding the documents across the table. "These are copies of the emails, account transfers, and attempted manipulations you've engaged in concerning Sophia's inheritance. Additionally, we have witness testimony from Ms. Woods, who has first-hand knowledge of your intentions." Derek's smile didn't falter, but his fingers tapped lightly on the table, betraying a small irritation. Michael Trent cleared his throat. "Let's review these calmly," he said, voice controlled but tense. Isla spoke quietly, almost shyly. I can confirm everything. He planned to take the funds, manipulate the trust, and use me to cover his actions." Derek's eyes narrowed at her. "You," he said, incredulous. "You're involved in this?" "No," Isla said firmly, shaking her head. "I refused to participate once I realized the truth." I watched Derek's face. He was struggling to maintain control, the facade of composure cracking under the weight of evidence. His lawyer, Michael Trent, whispered something in his ear, but Derek's jaw tightened. Vanessa continued, "We are willing to settle this amicably if Derek refrains from any claims against the inheritance and agrees to drop all fraudulent attempts. Otherwise, we proceed to court." For a moment, the room was silent. Derek's pride was evident. He opened his mouth, then closed it as if weighing his options. The arrogance, the sense of superiority, it was all there, but so was fear. Not fear of losing money, but fear of being exposed. Finally, Derek leaned back. "This isn't over," he said, his tone low, threatening. "You think you've won? You think this inheritance will stay in your hands?" Vanessa's voice was steady, ice cold. "You've already crossed the line legally, Derek. Threats won't change the evidence. Your actions have consequences." Derek shot me one last look, a mix of anger and frustration, then nodded curtly to his lawyer. They left the room without another word. I exhaled slowly, relief and tension mixing together. The first confrontation had gone better than I expected, but I knew it wasn't the end. Derek was unpredictable. He could try another tactic at any moment. Back at home, I sat at my grandfather's old dining table, reviewing the documents again. Everything was in order, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek would make one last, desperate attempt. The next week passed in a blur of preparations. I organized all my evidence, met with Vanessa to strategize, and coordinated with Isla, who had agreed to testify if necessary. Every email, every transfer, every suspicious signature was cataloged and backed up. I even contacted the local police to note that Derek had attempted to access accounts illegally, a precautionary measure that Vanessa advised. Then, one evening, as I was closing the gallery, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop this, Sophia. Walk away before it gets ugly. You don't know what I'm capable of." I froze, then showed Vanessa immediately. She read it carefully, then nodded. "This confirms it. Derek is trying to intimidate you. We document this, and it strengthens your case. Do not respond. Do not engage. Ignore it completely." I did exactly that. The next morning, the formal court date arrived. I put on my sharpest suit, my hair pulled back neatly, and drove to the Brazil County Courthouse. My heart was steady, but my mind raced with possibilities. Derek's threats, the forged will, his history of manipulation, it all led to this moment. Inside the courthouse, everything was austere. Wooden benches, high ceilings, the quiet hum of anticipation. Derek and Michael Trent were already present, looking composed but tense. Vanessa and I approached the front, placing our folders on the table. Judge Harold Stanton entered, tall, imposing, his gaze sweeping the courtroom. "Please be seated," he said. Vanessa leaned close to me. "Remember, Sophia. Stay calm. Present the facts, not emotions. Let the evidence speak." I nodded. As the judge began reviewing the case, I felt a surge of confidence. My grandfather's foresight, my careful planning, and the courage of Isla Woods, all of it was converging here. Derek had gambled on manipulation, deception, and charm, but in this courtroom, facts and truth had the final say. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something long buried: hope. The courtroom was silent as Judge Harold Stanton adjusted his glasses and opened the case files. I sat up straight, my hands clasped together, feeling the weight of every second. Derek's eyes never left me, sharp and calculating, as if trying to read my thoughts. Michael Trent scribbled notes, and I could see the tightness in Derek's jaw as he tapped his fingers nervously on the wooden bench. Today, Judge Stanton began. We are here to review the claims regarding the estate and associated assets of the late Robert Alexander Benson. We will first examine the validity of the inheritance and any challenges presented by Mr. Derek Lawson. I felt a flicker of apprehension. Derek's name had sounded different on official documents, more formal, more controlled. My grandfather had warned me about men like him, charmers who presented one face to the world while hiding darker motives. Vanessa stood calmly and laid out the first set of documents: emails, bank statements, and copies of attempted fraudulent transfers. Your Honor, she said, these documents demonstrate Mr. Lawson's deliberate attempts to manipulate the estate for personal gain, including falsified signatures and unauthorized access to accounts. Derek's face reddened slightly, but he remained silent. I noticed his fingers trembling subtly, a small betrayal of the confidence he always tried to project. Judge Stanton looked up from the files. Mr. Lawson, how do you respond to these claims? Derek leaned forward, his voice low but firm. These are misunderstandings. I've only ever acted in what I believed were my rights. There's nothing fraudulent here. Vanessa's voice cut through the tension. Your Honor, I have here a sealed letter from the late Mr. Benson, intended for submission if Mr. Lawson challenged the estate. This letter contains evidence collected by a private investigator, revealing Mr. Lawson's true intentions and previous manipulations in other relationships. The judge raised an eyebrow. Sealed evidence? Let's see it, Mr. Benson's attorney. Michael Trent immediately stood, objecting. Your Honor, this letter is unverified and should not be considered. Judge Stanton raised a hand. Objection noted. However, given the circumstances, I will review the contents, as they pertain directly to the claims against the estate. Vanessa carefully handed over the envelope. The judge broke the seal and began reading aloud. My heart pounded with each word. He has 2 failed marriages, the judge read, both involving women with considerable assets. He has a documented history of deceit and attempts to secure funds through manipulation. He falsified documents to gain access to bank accounts and tried to misappropriate property under false pretenses. He has used charm and feigned affection to achieve personal financial gain repeatedly. Derek's face fell as the judge continued. Every word was a hammer, striking at the carefully constructed image he had built over the years. Judge Stanton paused, then looked directly at Derek. Mr. Lawson, this evidence has serious implications. You were aware of the late Mr. Benson's instructions regarding the inheritance and the trust. Attempts to bypass these instructions are both unethical and unlawful. Derek muttered under his breath, and I caught a glimpse of desperation in his eyes. Vanessa leaned toward me. Stay composed. Let this unfold. He'll try something dramatic, but you're prepared. Then the judge revealed the final component, the personal letter addressed directly to me from my grandfather. My hands trembled as Vanessa passed it over. I opened it slowly. Dear Sophia, my grandfather's handwriting began, elegant and precise. If you are reading this, it means you have encountered challenges that test your resolve. I know the man in your life may not be who he claims. I have ensured that your inheritance is protected, with contingencies in place should deceit arise. Trust your instincts. Protect your life and your legacy. All evidence has been prepared to safeguard you. Know that I always believed in your strength and wisdom. Tears blurred my vision. His foresight, even from beyond the grave, had shielded me. He had anticipated every manipulation, every false charm, every attempt to exploit trust. I could feel the weight of his protection like an invisible armor around me. Judge Stanton folded the letters carefully and looked at Derek. Mr. Lawson, given the evidence, your claims against the estate are invalid. The court recognizes Sophia Benson as the sole beneficiary of the trust and all associated assets. Any attempts to interfere will result in legal consequences. Derek's face twisted with anger, shock, and disbelief. Michael Trent grabbed his arm, pulling him back. We need time to review, Derek stammered, though it was clear the court's decision was already final. Vanessa leaned over to me, whispering, "This is why we prepare. Facts, evidence, witnesses. Your grandfather made sure nothing could slip through." As we exited the courtroom, I could feel the weight lift from my shoulders. Derek followed, of course, glaring like a storm about to break, but I no longer feared him. He had lost control, and truth had won. Back at home, I finally allowed myself to breathe fully. The sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the small details of the apartment I had moved into my space, my sanctuary. Each plant, each piece of furniture, each book on the shelf felt like a testament to my independence. Later that evening, I called Isla Woods. "It's done," I said softly. "He won't be able to touch a thing." "I'm so glad," Isla replied, her voice gentle. "It feels good to see justice done, doesn't it?" "Yes," I said, thinking of my grandfather and all he had prepared. "Yes, it does." The next day, news began trickling in about Derek's attempts to salvage his reputation. Galleries that once embraced his work were turning him away. Local media caught wind of the court case, highlighting the deception and fraudulent attempts. Derek Lawson was no longer the charming artist he had pretended to be. He was a cautionary tale, a lesson in manipulation and greed. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm. My inheritance was secure, my grandfather's legacy intact, and my future free from the shadow of lies. The gallery, my friends, and my small, determined team of supporters were all part of a life I could finally shape without interference. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Derek's departure, the trust security, and the evidence laid out in court had not just protected me financially, they had freed me emotionally. I sat by the window that night, looking at the stars over Recife, Brazil. The warm breeze carried the faint scent of the sea, and I could feel the city moving around me, alive with possibility. It was a new life, one built on truth, courage, and foresight. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to embrace it fully. The morning sun poured through the shutters of my apartment, casting golden stripes across the wooden floor. I had stayed up late the night before, reading the last documents my grandfather had left, organizing my notes, and making plans for the next few months. For the first time in a long while, the day felt full of possibility rather than tension. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window, listening to the distant hum of Recife's streets awakening. The city felt alive, vibrant, and yet peaceful from this height. My thoughts drifted briefly to Derek Lawson. What would he do now that every attempt at manipulation had failed? I shook my head. That was his problem, not mine. Just as I was about to review the next steps for the gallery expansion, the doorbell rang. I frowned. I hadn't expected anyone so early. Walking to the door, I found a tall, slender woman with soft brown hair and warm eyes holding a small envelope. "Good morning, Miss Benson." "I'm Clara Mendez," she said, offering a polite nod. "I handle estate planning and financial consulting here in Recife. Your grandfather left instructions that I reach out to you regarding the management of the trust and investment opportunities for your business." I invited her inside, curiosity and caution mingling. Clara was composed, professional, yet not cold. She opened her laptop and began reviewing documents I hadn't seen before, investment portfolios, projected revenues, and expansion strategies that aligned with my vision for the gallery and wine bar. "Your grandfather was meticulous," she said, scrolling through spreadsheets. "He wanted to ensure that your inheritance could grow while supporting your personal projects. He anticipated that you would want to expand the gallery, perhaps even combine it with other ventures." I nodded, a sense of gratitude filling me. It felt like he was still guiding me, even from beyond the grave. I've always wanted the gallery to be more than just art displays, I admitted. I imagined a space where people could meet, enjoy wine, discover local artists, and feel inspired. I just didn't know where to start. Clara smiled. Then you're exactly where you need to be. With proper management, these plans are not only achievable, they can thrive. But there are some practical considerations we should discuss. We spent hours going through the plans, discussing renovations, staffing, and local market trends. Clara suggested partnerships with local wineries, marketing strategies targeting both tourists and locals, and ways to host events that would elevate the gallery's profile without compromising its artistic integrity. By midday, I felt energized. The combination of my grandfather's foresight and Clara's expertise gave me a roadmap I could trust. The fear that had once gripped me in Derek's shadow had faded. It was replaced by focus and determination. Later that afternoon, I walked through the streets of Recife to visit the gallery location. The building was modest, but held potential. Sunlight streamed through its high windows, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. I could already see the space transformed, a small wine bar on one side, open areas for art exhibitions, and cozy corners for readings and private tastings. A few locals stopped me as I walked, greeting me warmly. Word of my return to the city and my plans for the gallery had spread quickly. Some offered help, others advice, and a few promised to spread the news about the reopening. I felt a sense of community forming around my project, and it was exhilarating. Back at home, I sat down to organize my thoughts. Derek had tried to manipulate me, but he had underestimated my resilience and my grandfather's foresight. Every challenge he had posed only clarified the path I needed to take. My business, my life, and my freedom were intact. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Isla Woods, the woman who had once come to me with warnings about Derek. Sophia, I hope you're settling in. I wanted to let you know that everything Derek tried here has caught up with him. He's been blacklisted by galleries and investors alike. Your grandfather's preparations were perfect. Take care and know that you have allies. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. Isla had played her part, but the real victory belonged to truth, careful planning, and perseverance. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Contractors arrived for renovations, deliveries of rare wines and art installations began, and my small team, including a young assistant named Elena, proved indispensable. Elena was eager, curious, and surprisingly knowledgeable about wines and local art trends. Her energy was contagious, and I found myself relying on her more than I had expected. One afternoon, while reviewing a shipment of art pieces, I found myself reflecting on the events of the past year. I had gone from a woman trapped in a deceptive marriage to a widow of sorts, freed, empowered, and in control of my own life. Derek's schemes had failed spectacularly, and the inheritance my grandfather had protected was not just a financial safeguard, it was a symbol of trust, foresight, and unconditional love. But even in this new chapter, I realized I had to remain vigilant. Derek's history had proven he would never stop seeking advantage, even in failure. I had the advantage now, though, not fear, not naivety, but knowledge and preparation. That evening, I met Clara for a final consultation. She handed me a detailed plan for the first major event at the gallery, a combined wine tasting and art showcase featuring local artists. This will set the tone for everything else, she said. Make it memorable, make it unique. The community will remember this opening. I nodded. It's exactly what I envisioned. Thank you, Clara. Your guidance has made this possible. Walking home under the warm Recife sunset, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. The gallery would open, the community would embrace it, and for the first time, my vision could truly come to life. I had survived manipulation, deceit, and fear, and now I was ready to thrive. The journey was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. I would face each new challenge with the confidence my grandfather's trust had instilled in me. And one day, perhaps, I would look back on Derek Lawson not with fear or anger, but as a chapter that taught me the true value of foresight, resilience, and self-belief. The first week of preparations for the gallery's reopening passed in a blur. Contractors, designers, and suppliers swarmed the space like a well-choreographed dance. Every day brought small triumphs. An art piece hung perfectly, a shipment of rare wines arrived intact, and Elena, my assistant, proved indispensable in coordinating schedules and keeping track of the countless details. Yet, even amid this bustle, a lingering unease occasionally crept into my thoughts. Derek Lawson, now exposed as the fraud he truly was, had not been completely silent. Rumors floated through the local art scene, whispers of lawsuits and counterclaims. They didn't concern me legally. My grandfather's trust shielded every penny, but the social murmur had a strange way of gnawing at the edges of confidence. One morning, as I reviewed the schedule for the upcoming week, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Opening the door, I found a man in his late 40s, sharply dressed, with a professional but approachable demeanor. "Good morning, Miss Benson," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Victor Andrade. I specialize in event management and PR for cultural spaces. Your grandfather mentioned your plans to Clara, and I thought I could help ensure your gallery opening gets the attention it deserves." I studied him for a moment. There was something in his calm, confident presence that put me at ease. "Come in, Victor. I appreciate the initiative, but I warn you, we're still very much in preparation mode. Nothing is finalized yet." Victor smiled. "Perfect. That gives us room to strategize. From the layout to the invitations to engaging local influencers, we can create a buzz that's tasteful but effective. And don't worry, I know how to navigate delicate social circles." I felt a flicker of excitement. This was exactly what I needed, a professional perspective to match my vision. We spent the next several hours mapping out a timeline, selecting the key invitees, and planning special features for the evening, a wine tasting curated by local sommeliers, live music, and interactive art stations. By late afternoon, I stepped outside for a breath of air. The streets of Recife were alive with midweek energy, and the gallery's location, just off a quiet plaza, was beginning to feel like the center of something promising. But as I turned the corner toward my apartment, my phone buzzed. The message was from an unknown number. "Sophia Benson, you may think Derek Lawson is out of your life, but some debts are not so easily settled. Be careful who you trust." I froze. My pulse quickened, but only briefly. The warning felt more like intimidation than a real threat. Still, the nerve of the man. I shook my head. He could try to scare me all he wanted, but it wouldn't work. Not anymore. That evening, I met with Elena at the gallery to review deliveries. She was already sorting wine bottles and checking the art inventory. "You seem tense," she remarked, noticing my frown. "Nothing, just old ghosts," I said with a small smile. "It's nothing to worry about." Elena gave me a curious look but didn't press further. She had been perceptive enough to notice my hesitation, but not intrusive enough to make me feel cornered. I appreciated that. As we worked, we discussed the gallery's layout in more detail. I wanted to create pockets of intimacy for visitors, quiet corners where they could linger over wine, spaces for casual conversations about art, and a small stage for live performances. Elena suggested creative ways to arrange seating to encourage mingling without feeling crowded. The next morning brought a new surprise, a letter addressed to me from Derek Lawson himself. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The words were carefully measured, polite, almost innocent, but the message was clear. He hadn't given up. "Sophia, I realize now that I underestimated you, but I am not defeated. Consider this a courtesy warning. Some matters are best left unresolved. Think carefully about the company you keep and the choices you make. DL." I crumpled the letter without reading it again. Derek's attempts to intimidate me were pathetic. The truth was on my side, the trust protected me, and I had allies I could trust. I felt no fear, only annoyance that he still thought he could influence my life. By midweek, Clara arrived with final instructions regarding the investment funds. "Everything is ready for the opening," she said. "Your grandfather's trust was designed to allow for controlled growth. You're in an excellent position to take the gallery to the next level. I thanked her, feeling gratitude and pride. The pieces were finally falling into place: the team, the investors, the space, and the vision. Everything that Derek had tried to obstruct now served as fuel for my determination. That evening, as I walked through the gallery alone, the empty walls waiting to be filled, I felt a strange calm. The city's distant noises, honking cars, the chatter of passersby, the occasional bicycle bell, faded into the background. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice, urging patience and careful planning. I smiled softly. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was a number I recognized immediately: Victor Andrade. "Sophia, we have a problem," he said, his tone unusually serious. "One of the key art pieces scheduled for the opening has been held up at customs. There's no immediate explanation, but it might delay the exhibition if we don't act fast." I took a deep breath, fighting the familiar rush of anxiety. "What are our options?" Victor outlined potential solutions: a temporary replacement from a local artist, negotiating expedited release, or rearranging the exhibition's layout to accommodate the missing piece without diminishing the overall impact. I nodded, feeling my resolve harden. "Do what you need to do. I trust your judgment." We spent the next hour coordinating with the shipping agent, the artist, and my team. By the end of the day, we had a solution: an innovative display that incorporated interactive elements, turning a setback into an opportunity for creativity. Later, Elena and I stayed late, testing lighting and arranging art installations. The gallery, once quiet and lifeless, now held a heartbeat of its own. Shadows danced across the walls, highlighting textures and colors. I ran my hands along the polished surfaces, imagining the night of the grand opening, the buzz of visitors, and the excitement of seeing my vision realized. As I locked up for the night, I glanced back at the gallery one last time. It wasn't just a building, it was a promise. A promise that I could rebuild, reinvent, and thrive without fear, without deception, and without the shadow of Derek Lawson hanging over me. I felt a strange sense of anticipation, a mix of excitement and vigilance. This was more than an opening. It was a declaration of independence. The gallery would open, the community would embrace it, and I would emerge not only unbroken but stronger than ever. The coming weeks would test my patience, creativity, and resolve, but for the first time in years, I felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The morning light spilled across the gallery's polished floors as I arrived, coffee in hand, ready for another long day. The city of Recife hummed outside, but inside, Purple Leaf already felt alive. Contractors were adjusting lighting rigs, the new wine racks gleamed, and Elena was methodically checking every corner for imperfections. "Morning, Sophia," she greeted, glancing up from her checklist. "We've got a situation with a shipment from Lisbon." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of situation?" "A delay," she said. "Apparently, customs flagged a few of the glass decanters. They're saying the paperwork doesn't match the shipment description. Could take a few more days unless we expedite it." I suppressed a groan. It was the last thing we needed this close to the opening. I took a deep breath. "All right, let's call Victor and figure out a backup plan." By the time Victor arrived, the morning chaos had only grown. He surveyed the space, his expression serious but composed. "We can work with local suppliers to source replacements temporarily. No one will notice the difference if we stage them carefully." "Good," I said, relief washing over me. "Do whatever you need. We can't let small obstacles ruin the momentum we've built." Victor nodded and immediately got on the phone, coordinating with artisans across the city. Elena and I focused on the exhibition layout, moving pieces to create a harmonious flow, anticipating the visitor's experience. As the day wore on, my thoughts drifted to Derek Lawson. His last letter still lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't deny the irritation that lingered whenever I thought of him, how audacious he had been, how he still thought he could control the narrative of my life. But there was no time for dwelling on him. Today, there were deliveries to check, invoices to reconcile, and unexpected requests from artists to manage. One of them, a young painter named Miguel Costa, insisted on personally inspecting the display of his work. His intensity reminded me of Derek, so passionate, so stubborn, but unlike Derek, Miguel was sincere, unafraid to be honest, and entirely devoted to his craft. I just want to make sure my pieces are shown as intended, Miguel explained, gesturing toward the wall where his canvases would hang. They represent months of work, and I want the lighting and spacing to highlight their nuances. I smiled. Of course, Miguel. That's why we're here, to give your work the respect it deserves. Hours passed. By evening, we had finalized the floor plan, secured the temporary decanters, and coordinated with the musicians and sommeliers who would be part of the opening night. Exhausted but satisfied, I finally stepped outside to catch a breath. The air was warm, scented faintly with salt from the nearby Atlantic, carrying a gentle breeze across the plaza. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. My stomach tightened instinctively, but curiosity got the better of me. Sophia Benson, your plans are proceeding beautifully. But beware, not all obstacles are accidental. Some are deliberate. I froze for a moment, then exhaled slowly. It was exactly what I had suspected. The attempts to intimidate me hadn't stopped. Someone, whether Derek or another opportunist, was trying to test my composure. But instead of fear, it ignited determination. The next morning, I arrived early, determined to tackle every last detail. Elena and I worked in tandem, arranging wine displays, adjusting lighting, and rehearsing the flow for opening night. We laughed at our missteps, celebrated small victories, and envisioned how visitors would move through the space. Victor arrived mid-morning, holding a stack of printed invitations. We're ready to send these to the media, influencers, and selected collectors. It's subtle but effective, a balance between exclusivity and buzz. Perfect, I said. Do it. As the day progressed, minor glitches emerged. A supplier delayed an art piece, a musician canceled at the last minute, but each challenge was met with swift, calm solutions. I noticed a sense of pride swelling inside me. Months ago, I had been paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Now, I navigated obstacles with clarity and confidence. By late afternoon, we paused for a quick coffee break. I leaned against a window, watching the sun dip low over the city, painting the rooftops in shades of amber and gold. Elena joined me, holding her cup of coffee. "You've come a long way, Sophia," she said softly. "I've seen it, how you've transformed this face, this business, and yourself. You're remarkable." I smiled, touched by her sincerity. "Thank you, Elena. I couldn't have done it without you. And without my grandfather's trust guiding me." We shared a quiet moment, the hum of the city and the distant call of street vendors blending with the muted echoes of the gallery. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm, not triumph, not relief, but steady confidence. That evening, I met with Victor and Miguel for a final walkthrough. The gallery was transformed. Every painting, every piece of glassware, every display was in its place. Ready to welcome the first guests. Victor gave me a reassuring nod. "It's perfect, Sophia. Tomorrow, when the doors open, everything will fall into place." I nodded, my mind briefly drifting to Derek. His warnings, letters, and attempts to interfere had failed. The gallery's success was mine, and no amount of intimidation could change that. As I locked the doors for the night, I felt the weight of the past year lifting. The deception, betrayal, and fear were behind me. Ahead lay the promise of opportunity, growth, and independence. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of anticipation remained. Opening night wasn't just an event, it was a declaration. A challenge to anyone who had ever doubted me, a reminder that I had not only survived but thrived. Tomorrow, the city of Recife would see the birth of a new cultural space, and with it, the proof that Sophia Benson, daughter, granddaughter, entrepreneur, was unstoppable. The morning of the grand opening dawned clear and bright over Recife. The streets buzzed with life, but inside Purple Leaf, a different energy thrummed, anticipation, excitement, and a subtle edge of nerves. I arrived earlier than usual, dressed in a sleek emerald green dress that felt both elegant and commanding. Today wasn't just about style, it was about presence, projecting the confidence I had fought so hard to reclaim. Elena was already there, fussing over the final arrangements. "We need the lighting just right," she said, gesturing toward the canvases. "Every shadow, every reflection, it has to feel intentional, not accidental." "I trust you," I said with a smile. "Let's make it unforgettable." Victor appeared soon after, carrying the guest list and checking last-minute details with the caterer and musicians. He gave me a thumbs up. "All set. Media, VIPs, collectors, they're all confirmed. It's going to be a full house." I took a deep breath, letting the anticipation settle into resolve. Opening day had always felt like a rite of passage. Today, it was more than that, it was a personal statement. After the trials of the past year, the betrayals, the threats, and the manipulations, I was finally taking control of my story. As the first guests began to arrive, I positioned myself near the entrance, greeting each with warmth and composure. It wasn't just about hospitality, it was about presence, showing that every element of the gallery, from the layout to the wine selection, was deliberate, curated, and a reflection of the vision I had fought to realize. Among the early arrivals was Mariana Ribeiro, a well-known collector from Sao Paulo. She stepped inside, scanning the space with a critical but appreciative eye. "Sophia," she said, extending her hand. "This is remarkable. You've created a world within these walls." "Thank you, Mariana," I replied. "It's a collaboration. Artists, artisans, and everyone who believed in this project made it possible." The flow of guests picked up rapidly. Journalists snapped photos, influencers shared live updates, and regular customers were delighted by the transformation. I moved between conversations, balancing attentiveness with poise, ensuring everyone felt seen without losing myself in the whirlwind. Then, just as I was congratulating an emerging painter on the placement of her pieces, my phone buzzed. I glanced down to see an unfamiliar number. Hesitation flickered, but curiosity won. "Be careful tonight. Not everyone here comes with pure intentions." My stomach tightened. It was anonymous, but the message carried a cold familiarity, the same type of intimidation I had received before. My mind immediately jumped to Derek Lawson, though there was no proof. I shoved the fear aside and focused on the gallery, refusing to let a shadow from the past ruin this day. Hours passed, and the evening descended in a warm glow. The lights softened, music drifted through the space, and glasses of wine circulated among the guests. I noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. People were genuinely enjoying themselves, their expressions a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Victor approached with a discreet nod. "Everything is going smoothly. You should take a moment for yourself." I found a quiet corner, glass in hand, and allowed myself a brief exhale. It felt surreal to witness this, the gallery alive with energy, my vision realized. Every challenge I had faced over the past months, every betrayal and obstacle, had led to this moment. Just then, a familiar figure entered the gallery, and my pulse quickened. Derek Lawson. He lingered near the entrance, surveying the space with an expression that was part curiosity, part calculation. It was clear he had no intention of mingling casually. He was here for observation, perhaps even interference. I swallowed a rising tide of anger and reminded myself to stay composed. Derek's presence wasn't welcome, but it wasn't a threat I couldn't handle. I had faced him before, survived his manipulations, and today, the gallery was a testament to my strength and autonomy. Elena leaned close. "Do you want me to handle him?" "No," I said firmly. "I can manage." I walked toward him, each step measured, deliberate. "Good evening, Derek," I said, my voice calm but firm. "What brings you here tonight?" He offered a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I heard about your gallery opening. Thought I'd see it for myself." "I see," I replied, letting the weight of the statement settle. "I hope you enjoy it." He nodded, though I could sense the tension behind his polite facade. Without another word, I turned and walked back toward the crowd, keeping my focus on the gallery and the people who had made this event possible. Derek lingered for a few moments, then slipped into the background, a reminder that the past was never far, but it no longer held power over me. By the end of the night, every element of the event had unfolded flawlessly. Guests left with smiles, photographers captured moments that would be shared across social media, and artists expressed gratitude for the exposure and recognition. I finally allowed myself to breathe fully, leaning against the doorframe as the last of the guests departed. Victor approached, clapping me lightly on the shoulder. "You did it, Sophia. This was more than an opening, it was a statement. You've claimed your space, literally and figuratively." I nodded, letting a quiet satisfaction settle over me. The gallery was thriving, my vision realized, and my independence secured. The whispers of doubt, the shadows of past deceit, all faded against the reality I had built. Later that night, I sat alone on the balcony, overlooking the glittering city lights of Recife. A soft breeze carried the distant hum of the ocean, and I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. The journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and obstacles, but it had forged me into someone stronger, wiser, and resolutely independent. And as I sipped a glass of wine, I made a silent vow. No one, no past lover, no opportunist, no threat, would ever take control of my life again. The future was mine, and I was ready. The morning after the grand opening was calm, almost deceptively peaceful. The city of Recife was waking up with its usual rhythm, street vendors setting up their carts, the distant roar of motorcycles weaving through traffic, and the ocean glinting in the early sun. But inside Purple Leaf, I was already in motion, reviewing the guest feedback from the night before, checking inventory, and mapping out the next phase of expansion. Victor had arrived early, holding a folder stuffed with invoices and emails. "We've already got follow-up requests from 3 collectors who want private showings," he said, his voice a mixture of excitement and exhaustion. "And a restaurant chain wants to collaborate on a wine tasting evening. Seems like your opening left quite an impression."